Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I don't know what number of meeting this is. I can do a count later on, but it's been going a long time, which is a good thing. Thank you for joining the Open Source Committee meeting. On our agenda, we got old business updates, mostly from the technical working groups. And we did have the governance policy walkthrough by MPJ this last Tuesday, which I think was good reception overall. With that being said, I'll just hand it over to you, Michael, talk about it. And then I think we wanted to do an enactment vote.
Yeah, I think we've had enough rounds of people looking at it. There was a lot of discussion during the call, or people seeming interested in the call, but none of them left any comments. So go figure. Thanks to everyone for contributing, particularly Adam and Sebastian. I think that's been very helpful, in fact. And things are going in the right direction, which is to say, getting shorter, the way it should be. So I'm pretty happy with the current state, and I think I'd be comfortable with what we have as a first draft. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other update was that I did put my communications survey out in the town hall as well. I only got another 5 responses or so. I've been doing been doing a tiny bit of analysis on it. So like there's the only thing I've discovered so far, which I suspect is sort of obvious, but kind of interesting to see it interesting to see it borne out, which is that the people who contributed to open source projects hate Matrix. Sorry, to 10 plus open source projects hate Discord, and the people who've contributed to fewer open source projects like Discord. That's perhaps not going to surprise anyone, but there you go.
Yeah, these are the last TBDs, right, in the draft right now. There's 2 TBDs, which is the communication platforms, and we should probably mention it or refer to where it's defined. Otherwise, it's a kind of a moot point, especially if it's a must right now in the policy. I mean, any must can be made a should. This is what we made clear, hopefully. Sure.
So I think what I would like to do, so maybe this is the next thing I would like to do would be to just for us to pick a suggestion, a proposal for what we want everyone to use, and then to go and do a bit of handshaking. Oh, I don't mean handshaking. Bit of talking to people and check whether anyone is going to kick up a massive fuss about it. And if there's a general feeling that everyone's fine with that, then maybe we can just do it. Because otherwise, I feel like it's difficult to. I don't see how else to move forward really. Yes, maybe we can talk about that as well. Right. So I guess So then I have 2 concrete proposals that maybe we could vote on. So proposal number 1, I think we should enact the current policy or whatever, just commit it as our current draft, as a current policy. And proposal 2, I'd like to propose that we suggest that people use Matrix and that they use GitHub discussions for or issues as they like for other persistent asynchronous communication. And that's something we can help with. If we do decide to do this, probably we'll want Christian to set up a Matrix space that we can then make channels for everyone systematically, but I'd want to go and do some more temperature checking. So those are my 2 proposals for today.
Okay, so on the first proposal, all in favor of voting to enact the governance policy and then test it with Marchin and then slowly pass it out through the rest of the projects, and then we'll do continuous improvements on. I'll say aye or put the thumbs up emoji. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we got majority. Cool. And all in favor of the second piece where we propose this is what we want to do some temperature checking for communications, and I'll take the action to set up some Matrix account for us.
Yeah, with the specifically Matrix plus GitHub discussions.
Okay. Okay. I think
so Matrix would be for internal EMC communications
for public.
Or for
public chat channels. Well, so I'm hoping that 99% of stuff can just be public, and I don't know if there needs to be private. The main thing that seems like it needs to be private is security stuff, but also I guess people can form ad hoc if people want to form an additional private channel, I think that's up to them. And I'm not sure we need to really say anything about that. Maybe we should. What do you think?
Would a bridge to
They have
Discord be on
private
the table?
channels probably already. Sorry.
Would a bridge to Discord be on the table?
Who's going to maintain it? I mean, I think so. Question one would be: is the demand right? So I think okay, maybe that's my real answer. Is if we have people who are saying, "Oh, I want to participate, I want to join the channel for Project X, but I haven't because it's on Matrix," then if people start saying that, then I think we should think about doing a bridge. But if everyone just goes and installs a Matrix client, then I think that's good enough. Would be my feeling.
I think maybe that particularly if the big announcements are put into maybe the GitHub discussions, that's probably sufficient. I could see that a lot of ecosystem participants who may be MBO members in the future but aren't developers are not going to go to the steps of installing yet another messaging program a la Matrix in order to be informed. But browsing through a GitHub probably is sufficient to say we published this information. So information about where we're going with Cardano node or any other package is accessible to you through a public communication channel. So I'm in favor.
I think that's a good call.
Yeah, I think GitHub has to be the source of truth for everything. All other communications can be ad hoc and keep going, but it has to be reflected on GitHub at the end of the day.
We could set things to have disappearing messages to prevent anyone from relying on chat history. Maybe that's a bit of a drastic move.
I will definitely put your name on that one. Okay. So I think that concludes our first order of business action items on that. We will do the pilot. I'll work with Marcin and MPJ on getting that set up for network, and we'll do some lessons learned as we go set it up, and then slowly do continuous improvement, and then pass it out to the rest of the projects. And then I'll go work on getting Matrix and partner on getting temperature checks for it, as well as GitHub discussions. Okay.
We just comment on the PR and just merge it now because we accepted it here.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Do you want to click the big green button?
RC meeting 2024-02-02, let the majority vote. Then commit, merge, confirmed.
This will be my celebratory shot.
Pardon?
Just Gatorade.
Yes, and by next meeting, I might also try and so we have some of this content that's in the Cardano Engineering Handbook that I mentioned a few times before. So I might try and mine some of that for next time. And ping you all to take a look. Probably the most boring stuff to begin with, but
Okay, I'll add it to the agenda to talk about new business next week. And then I think after we get this done, your next focus is security policy as well. Okay.
It's good. Since we have quite a lot of people here today, is anyone keen to be involved in discussion about how we should deal with security issues? So I know Kevin Hammond is, so I'll probably try and get him in for at least some discussion. But does anyone else have burning feelings about this?
Yeah, I've been involved in similar discussions, which are probably a quite different, like less critical, right, viewpoint from. I mean, for Cardano node, many things are way different than for other less critical components.
Yeah, and so we want something that ideally will work for both. Or we need to say, look, you're gonna here's the baseline. If you have more serious needs, then you need to have your own policy. Which
as always, I could be like the advocate for being less hiding, more directly fixing, and being public about everything, because hiding bugs is not a good idea. But there is a counterpoint, of course, to it, right?
Yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts as well, and happy to join that discussion.
Great.
Okay. I'm adding you.
I would also like to join.
Okay.
Yeah. I got Kevin, Seb, Adam, Marcin, you, Michael, and then me, just because I have to be part of that kind of conversations.
I'm hoping this will be maybe this is a vain hope. I hope it'll be less involved in this governance stuff because we have more prior art to go on, I think, both within Cardano and with other communities. So
Yeah.
Hopefully, we just more or less agree on an approach and then write it down.
Next order of business is the Strategy Technical Working Group. Sandip is unavailable to make it today. We're moving this agenda item to next week, but brief update is y'all might see Bogdan and George. They're actually my OSPO support staff, and they'll be taking on the lead of actually drafting out the work of the strategy, and we'll be working to incorporate Sandip's feedback into that. And then once we start getting drafts of that, we'll continuously update each week and get committee input to that until we get to a final ratification. The other update, I'll actually hand it over to George to talk about the OSPO implementation and the kind of rough plan for that, just to make you all aware of what we're planning on doing.
Yes, I will try to make a share of my screen. Oh, I can't do it. I don't know why it stops me to do that. But anyway, in fact, we started from the first limitation of time we have. That means 9 weeks, including this one. We should deliver 4 of our tasks. The first one, establish the OSPO governance model and structure. The second one is about develop open source strategy and policies, what Christian just mentioned. The third one is about functional reporting areas for delivery assurance. And the last one is the GitHub audit for policy alignment. We have a short plan. Unfortunately, I cannot share. I hope I will share it in the document.
Is it the paper that you had sent me? I can share screen to show that.
Yeah, I changed it. It's in fact a nice picture with a plan. I will try to share this if possible. I try to do it in our communication chat here. Let me try to see it. Where is the chat here? Yeah, I hope it will work. And I think I don't have too much to say, just to show you. It's an initial project plan. I don't know if it worked. It seems not. Let me try to make a file. No, I tried to put it here in Messenger, but it doesn't work. I don't know why. Until now, it worked internally for us. So mainly, I try to describe and to not be boring what we intend to do. First of all, it's to see how the internal, and I'm saying here internal because it's a specific working modus create OSPO department. It's implemented now. So we'll update, and in the next 3 weeks, we'll work to complete and create a uniform structure based on our modus create OSPO department internal process and structure. Then we'll come back and try to map and see where we can overpose the roles, the processes, and everything we have in modus create in what is today functional for the Intersect OSPO. And this is the plan to have something ready with all the processes defined, approved, in place, to be able to run the first pilot starting somewhere in April. So the first plan is to try to transfer the functional part already running in modus create OSPO department into Intersect let's say, sandbox, where we can test after that the pilot to see if the processes are working, the communication, collaboration, structuring, and everything works for Intersect. Of course, after that will come the fine-tuning, adding the processes that are missing, because we no more have an internal approach, which is the one in Modus Create, but an external one involving the huge community. Then for the open source strategy and policies, we are following what Christian just said, and we intend in the first 4 weeks to be able to find all the sources for this strategy, not only for the OSPO, so the OSPO should be synchronized with the Intersect strategy, and of course with the open source committee strategies. And for the functional reporting areas and delivery assurance, we are trying now with our colleagues in Modus Create to complete as definitions and processes what we have in Modus Create. And in the last 6 weeks from this 9, we'll try to see what we can use internally for Intersect. At the end, about the GitHub audit and policy alignment, in the first 3 weeks, we'll try to see exactly what we have today specified by Christian. And of course, in the last 6 weeks also, we'll try to see how this works for Intersect. Definitely, this is a rough initial project plan. It's really under huge pressure of time, because normally there is not too many done as we expected to have at this moment based on the latest quarters. But we'll start it and we'll keep you informed and see what happens and which are the changes we are operating every week. Thank you very much.
Any questions related to that? That'll enable us to be set up so we can actually start helping and supporting projects and help with the driving open source altogether. Okay. Thank you, George, for that. The next item on the list, over to you, Adam, on your voting pull request.
All right, yeah. So I wrote just kind of a draft on what the proposed voting and board election, or not board, committee election process or procedure might be. We haven't had a ton of feedback yet on it. I know Michael PJ had some concern about voter burnout and apathy, especially if the elections are to be for all the committees and to all of the different working groups and committees. So essentially, in short, it's a 3-period annual staggered board structure. So we would replace a cohort of 3 committee seats every 4 months, starting in February and ending around October. This would allow us to avoid the big holiday and summer breaks pretty conveniently in terms of voting and campaign and election cycles for these seats, assuming that they're hotly contested, while essentially maintaining a continuity of the board throughout the year so that we never have this big interim period where there's a lot of disruption. But yeah, it was just a draft that I kind of dreamed up one night. So happy to hear criticisms and feedback, or drop it down to a every 6-month election cycle if we think that would be better. But I definitely think we want to go with somehow staggered terms, whether that's 2-year terms that are we're voting half the committee once per year, or 12-month terms and it's every 6 months that we are getting fresh blood in there. Go ahead, Michael.
Just one of the things I wanted to highlight, which was the question about who the voting franchise is. So my understanding from talking to Christian is that the committees, the main Intersect committees are supposed to be elected by the members of Intersect. Is that right, Christian?
Yeah, I mean that's the intent. Is we
So-
are elected by.
Is Intersect gonna handle that process at all? Like, are they gonna provide some voting infrastructure and like tell people when there are votes happening or something? Because
We do have a committee for that, and I will have inputs. So that's the other thing with this is we
maybe
wouldn't
it's
start
their job.
looking towards the voting process till like June, July, whenever the interim is supposed to end its phase. So they will have inputs probably towards April on how that actually carries out. But at least we can define our own internal process for how we want to do it.
Sure. So maybe
but
we
actual
should then
campaigning-
leave out those details, but stuff like how long we want the terms to be and so on seems like it should be something we can define. And to be honest, that makes me more worried, right? Like I don't know how active the members of Intersect are going to be, but how many committees are there? There's like 5 or something,
There's
and 6
7
committees.
Yeah, 7.
7.
Yeah, 2
7
haven't started
committees.
just yet.
And they're good if they're all going to rotate their members twice or 3 times a year. That is like 14 to 21 elections per year. How many Intersect members are going to pay attention to any of those? So this is like a problem that's like broader than us, right? This is not just our problem, but it is something that I do worry about a bit.
Well, and I think the committees themselves will attract their own target audiences for who's going to participate and care. And I mean, we have our seats because people here are interested in the open source of Cardano altogether. So I think we might not have so much competition when it comes to re-election. Just depends on how the numbers grow. But I think we're already close to like 1,100 members altogether. And once people start actually getting more interacted as Intersect fully develops until I think Q2, participation will increase across the board. But I think for right now, it'll be fairly straightforward when it comes to the election process. I like Adam's proposal.
Sebastian, did you have something?
I just had a quick question, and I'm not sure where I haven't had read yet in detail. I'm planning to do very much. Thank you for the contribution, Adam. And but this scheme you probably proposed it to all committees, right? Or is it only for us? What's the scope? Is it like for all of these committees, the same model?
Well, it just came up. We were talking in the OSC feedback channel on the Discord one evening about needing to come up with some sort of a voting and election process for this committee. So that was my scope of thinking, was how should the open source committee kind of handle its election and cycling. From what I understand, it's been now kind of shared with the rest of the committees and Intersect at large in terms of should this be adopted by the larger Intersect organization. That was not my intent when writing it. I was thinking about governing a committee rather than the kind of full scope of the entire MBO. But I just want to echo kind of what Christian said as well. To Michael's concern, I think voters are going to naturally find kind of their niche places where they feel comfortable voicing their opinion and or passionate about ensuring that their guy gets elected. So probably one of the better things we can hope for is that this doesn't become highly politicized, and it's especially for things like the open source and security committees and things like that. It's more of a meritocracy gesture more than anything, and it's not different camps of politics getting in the way. But of course, plan for the worst and hope for the best is always the best solution.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to only focus on it for the open source committee and kind of pilot test it that way. Matt, over to you. Matt's kind of been leading a lot of the committee discussions at Intersect.
I just want to jump in and say sorry, Adam, but thank you. So I'm Matt. I haven't met with your work at Intersect. One of the things that we've been doing is gathering all the suggestions from working groups and committees on how they should work and put them in a big pile. And we have an advisory body of community members, which I think are meeting for the first time next week. And Adam, your suggestion is something we've made sure that they're aware of if they're not already, or will make aware of. And it's all the questions you've just raised what we've put to them. Should it be the same rules and voting process, albeit staggered across all the committees? So it makes it really easy to understand if you leave one committee how another one operates. So the learning curve. We've suggested to them that that's something you might want to consider. If every committee is wildly different in how they operate, then it makes it hard. You have to learn 7 times. But yeah, just to say like that, those questions are happening, and what we've asked for of this advisory group is to say we don't want to mandate, but we feel that we should give at least a minimal viable working suggestion. So if all else fails, there's enough collateral there that they can operate and vote members and do stuff. And then as long as they're up and running, from that point, they can edit, amend to their own needs. But if we felt like if we didn't give a suggestion, then they would iterate for days, weeks, months, indefinitely around how to stand up and operate and do these sort of fundamental things. So that's our approach, is we will give them a scaffold and say that will work, but change it for your own needs. All the committees are a little bit different. You might have different numbers of people. You might have different perspectives you're trying to capture. So yeah, and there's more stuff on that coming out on the website. There's some really high level framework stuff around purpose of the committees, which should be out next week, but don't quote me on that because I don't work in our marketing team. And then, this advisory board, we're, sharing the problem and saying, give us your best ideas, and we'll share them, right? And maybe vote on them to pick the best 3 or 4 and give that as a blueprint that committees can adopt until they can mature and tailor their own.
Yeah,
that was all, but it's all happening, and unfortunately, that's been my job at Intersect over the last week, is to pull all those examples and Discord conversations and stuff that people have said and gone, that's a really good idea, put it in a basket. That's a really good idea, put it in a basket. So yeah, they'll start shuffling through those next week, and kind of we'll publish some of the best thoughts and say, yeah, we endorse that. Try it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good segue point too, if there's no more comments towards that.
I just
But
want to say one thing on that, which is it sounds like, one output from us there is, I guess, that, in terms of what we maybe want to have something to say about, what terms we have, but I'm not sure whether any of it we particularly want to manage our own voting process or anything like that. So, it would be great if some stuff was handled in a consistent and centralized way, because nobody's got time for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're looking at as well is what kind of arbitration sort of processes should there be? What happens if you all get to a stalemate, if you all fall out, if we end up with 2 open source committees because you've factioned, and again, we don't want to deal with that. We want to empower one of the committees, possibly the membership and community committee, to be empowered to deal with those decisions and deciding votes, or to maybe a suggestion would be for them to run a committee if it fell into disrepute for a period of time until it was deemed operational. Who knows? But it's a question on the how would you want to do this, or would you want someone from Intersect to do it? I mean, we will attend the committee and working group meetings only to make sure that they're fair and they're operating and there is good suggestion. We've sat in on some already. It's only to make sure that we're sharing the knowledge and the best practice, not in the technical ideas, but just in the way you guys do things. So we were on the wallets working group last week. I think about 5 of us turned up. I know, Adam, you were there, but we've leaned on Ryan because there's been some really great ideas in process and how to structure things there. We've taken that, white labeled it, and we'll give it out as, collateral that other working groups and committees can use. That was it.
Okay.
You, Christian, sorry for stealing your session.
Oh, you're good. I was just making sure there's no more comments. But if anyone has any thoughts, please add them to his pull request. Definitely wanted to get that to the committee here and just get our thoughts running. And then working with Matt, we should probably have the Intersect standard, and then we can tailor the specific things for the open source committee. And I don't think we have to get a decision on that till probably April. But just wanted to make sure we had some ideas drafted. And I think we're over to you, Matt, to talk about delivery assurance as well. Just so there's been big questions about how the open source committee ties into the bigger picture of Intersect, and Matt is kind of the guy who's handling all that from the technical side. So.
Yeah, hi. So there aren't many of us yet, so many hats, committees, and so my actual proper job is I'm working in our delivery assurance office, so looking after delivery assurance and technical assurance. And Christian just asked me to come along and say a few words about that. Like many things, we're starting out. A big proportion of our work to start off with has been novating several key contracts from IOG across to Intersect, where the work directly relates to Cardano. So there's been a huge process over the last couple of months doing that, and all the kind of boring legal risk assessment type stuff you can imagine. But that is coming towards an end now, and we are beginning to be on a level plane. And I just want to run through kind of what our intentions are, because it's all intended to be open. And again, all of this stuff in due course will be hitting the websites. So we've had introduction sessions and contract novations with a number of key contracts which were going into IOI, and that relationship will now sit with Intersect. We will introduce what these contracts are and where they exist and where the dependencies are to the community, so you can see it's not meant to be a mysterious web of how these things have happened in the past. We want to be very clear about and celebrate the different organizations and teams which are contributing to work. So there will be a public roadmap of work. We're in a process of asking all our vendors to contribute to that. We are looking at change management, security management, interestingly, and incident management processes. There's a number of kind of artifacts which are coming out around timelines, communication protocols. There will be a piece of work with the community around quality. So how do we get the community to endorse the quality that some of these teams are doing? We know that we're coming into the process where things are already happening. So that quality process will start with quality of work, which is already ongoing. And the quality process will morph into how do we assure that work is going to the right people to get quality from the off. But obviously the hamster wheel is spinning, so we can't start from that starting point. We have to accept that there is work in train that we are becoming responsible for, and there will be new work in the future where we can put procedures or policies in place at the start. And in technical assurance, it's practically the same. Again, hopefully, by the time February is out, there'll be a wealth of information on our website around the hard fault and how that coordination is going to work, and all the outreach that we'll be doing with SPOs and exchanges and app owners to endorse them into the process and to really get their buy-in around how they can help and act rather than being a reactionary thing at the end. We want to bring you in as early into the process as we possibly can to share that work. And obviously through the delivery and technical assurance office that sits very closely with Christian's world in open source, and we'll look to highlight that to you as soon as possible. So apologies, I don't have anything to share yet, but that's kind of the mantra we're taking in the work we're working towards. Over December and January, it was very much focused on some sort of back office processes, the ability to pay milestones, novate contracts, sort out the various liabilities. But now that's done, we're kind of onto the fun bit, which is teams doing work, celebrating that work and getting it out there so people can play with it and comment on it. Yes, Michael.
Just one comment about this quality thing, which is that it would be great if, I feel like one of our things we've been sort of trying to go for is that as much as possible, Intersect projects are normal open source projects. The process by which major vendors contribute work is the same as any other person. And what that suggests to me is that it'd be great if we could get to a position where these quality gates are not, linked to contractual work, but are just part of the processes of the projects that apply regardless. So
yeah, no,
just a thought was that I was like, I would like this to be attached to project rather than contract if that's possible. But that was
I agree. It's just realization, but it's not realization. It's an understanding that we're picking up several contracts in train, and they are what they are, and it's sharing that so we can learn from it, getting community feedback, and saying, well, the next time we sign a contract, actually, it shouldn't say this, it should say that, and actually, it shouldn't say have this quality metric in your contract. It should be you delivered by our principles, and therefore quality is built in. So it's understanding that there's a change in that regard, but we're very cognizant of it. Intersect don't have the manpower and nor wants or remitted to check every line of code and every deliverable. It's to facilitate the execution. So the community says jump, these people jump. We make sure that happens, and it's how we can do that in a trusting, sharing, open way. So there will be a change from it being baked into contracts to it being part and parcel of life of working on Cardano.
Any other questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt. Good description. To the last item, we still have you on the call, right, Alex? So on the Discord channel, we were talking about licensing, and I think currently the breakout for Intersect projects is mostly Apache 2, and then there's 2 individual projects with a separate license. But we were thinking about licenses to work with in the future, and Alex brought up BSL. And even though we don't have a specific use case, I could see potential use cases in the future. So I'll let him talk to that point.
Oh, thank you. So first of all, I must say I'm under tremendous pressure right now because seeing all the people who are much more merit than I do, and it's difficult. But I'm grateful for being able to get inspired by an idea because this is something that's not very often to happen. And I want to thank first Randall, who suggested this idea, like, man, you should study this idea and go bring it into open source committee because this is a fundamental change that can be very powerful. And reading into this, and thanks to Adam Dean for helping me understand this, I believe that's true. This license will protect Cardano community, and especially people who want to build startups on Cardano. So what I did, I wrote a short speech, my will to Cardano, if I die, you should do this. And the second, what I did, I summarized pros and cons of this license using ChatGPT because it speaks better than I do. And I put it in the chat in Discord. So if anyone is interested in the details, please read the Discord. And at this, I must say that I don't feel entitled to be discussing this idea. I just want to bring your attention to it because to me, it speaks really loudly. And I want Randall to comment because he is proposing this idea to me, and I'm proposing this idea to you. And seriously, Randall is a genius. So you should really listen to him. That's all what I want to say.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Floor is open if you want to talk, Randall. And Philip, I know your hand's up as well.
Thanks, Alex. I'm blushing. Yeah, for me, it's just about actually being business friendly. When all of the grants say, well, you have to release the software open source and let anyone else commercialize. It just reminds me of Amazon and Elasticsearch, and like an open invitation for someone else to take advantage of community work that we do. I'm all for sharing. It's just in a business environment, having no course to that's supported by the Treasury to have a have one's investment lead to benefit, if it's benefit only everybody rather than having a course for benefit of the creator, it feels imbalanced. that's probably not a great way to say it. Imbalanced. I don't like.
May I just
talking in-
jump in and say it feels exploitative and toxic to me personally as a contributor to open source projects everywhere, and just reading about open source in general. I think many people feel the same way, especially young guys. And I know you guys don't really see much of the people who don't have experience, but there's many people and much more than you, and that's why I support this idea with all my heart.
Philip, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I can speak on this topic a bit. So, I mean, I've done a lot of work this year, just trying to convince projects to open source their smart contracts. And to this degree, we've offered free audits, we've offered things on reduced cost and pro bono, we've audited a ton of open source projects. And the main pushback I see is, this competitive advantage thing of, oh, if we open source our smart contracts, then someone's going to copy paste it and release a clone. And in practice, this doesn't really happen. If you look at every ecosystem everywhere, the top 100 DApps are always open source. But yeah, in the case that, people have this fear and they really genuinely believe that, some aspect of their application is just so beyond everything else that they want to protect its IP while also, being transparent and demonstrating that they don't have backdoors or other vulnerabilities, then BSL has been a really convincing argument, right? Because, a lot of people don't even know that this is an option to open source their work. And one of the things that this committee can do that could be helpful for the ecosystem is just to illustrate that, yeah, this is possible, right? You can they call it source available, right? You can make the source code of your decentralized application available without actually giving away commercial licenses or rights to use your work.
Go Adam and then Michael.
Yeah, first I wanted to thank Randall and Alex because I didn't know about this license before them bringing it up for discussion in the chat. What I believe kind of the feedback has been from my side is that I don't know if this is actually a conversation within the purview of this committee that does focus specific, this is the open source committee. And our remit is more the projects that are owned intrinsically by the Intersect MBO. I love this license, and I think it should be a viable option probably for grants and treasury funding if we decide that something deserves support from an Intersect perspective. I just don't know if it makes if I see right now a business use case where any Intersect owned repositories would ever be licensed under BSL. But that said, I'm interested. I'm digging more into it. And again, thank you guys for bringing it up for discussion, if nothing else, because it's been a great avenue to learn, because you hear about the big open source licenses, but these are interesting ones to see.
Michael.
I think it definitely seems interesting. I think it kind of cuts to the question of why are we doing open source, and I'm actually interested in maybe just first a quick question for Philip. Would you think it would be helpful for people to be you've been asking people to open source their DApps, but you think it would be helpful for them to be source available under the BSL? What is the outcome we're hoping for? That people can read them and learn from them, but not reuse them?
Right. So there's two fronts, right? Ideally, I want everything to be open source, and I think that is a huge problem in Cardano, right? The fact that every ecosystem only has a finite amount of money that goes into development, right, of new architecture, of new technology, right? And if there's $1 million spent, on development in Ethereum and $1 million spent on development in Cardano, Ethereum, right, has this zero acceptance policy for closed source culture. And what that means is that this $1 million is used quite effectively, right? Everyone is building on top of work that other people built. Where if you look at Cardano, we have like 30 different multi-sig implementations that are all closed source, and they all pay for audits, and they all pay for expensive development, right? So maybe $1 million doesn't get you as far, right, with this closed source stuff. But yeah, so that's like why I want everyone open source fully. But you know, for some people, it's just not an option, right? You have to sort of ease them into it. And I've noticed that, you know, when even when I've offered like entirely zero cost audits, which it is a lot, it's a lot of development costs on our end. They're still not open to the idea of open sourcing their smart contracts because they believe that, you know, there's some intrinsic, they have some technical advantage over everyone else, and they're going to get copied. And
I
in
guess
this
I'm asking,
case,
like, what do you think the community would get if they did it with the BSL?
right? And in this case, with BSL, although we don't get that development benefit, what we do get is the ability to independently review the contracts to see that, you know, it is indeed decentralized. User funds are safe.
I see.
There's no back doors. You know, there's no vulnerabilities, because it's a very different relationship. One, when you're paying for an audit, right? Even for us, right? If someone pays us for an audit and we release a report, audits aren't guaranteed to catch everything. And in the real world, right? In practice, you're a client of the person who's paying you for an audit. So your interests are sort of going to be skewed towards them, right? When someone pays you for an audit, you're less likely to say, this protocol is totally centralized garbage, right? In your audit report. It's an unlikely outcome. So, you know, for security and reasons like this, like, I think it's very important that these contracts are made source available so that we can actually know, you know, what's going on behind the scenes.
I think that's a great reason. But it seems like it fits like a different class of project. Like, I mean, some of the things I think we're going to be doing at Intersect are going to be more like Cardano, where it's going to be proper open source. But yeah, I mean, I have no idea if we're going to be providing grants for people to build products that we then are kind of expecting them to run as businesses, which, you know, we might do. You know, we provide seed. That's the sort of thing that it can be a good use of a foundation's money to provide seed funding for a business that they think is going to be very useful for people. We might well want to say, well, but in addition, it has to be BSL so that people can see the source. But I think for a lot of the things we'd want to give grants to, you kind of want to be like, well, we paid for it, we own it, the community should be able to use it. So I would have thought this would be most likely to really only apply if we're actually deliberately trying to produce something that's going to be run as a business by someone else going forwards, which is maybe unusual. Don't know.
With the kind of budgets we're seeing, we paid for it isn't really a fair characterization. We contributed funding toward it, but we didn't pay for it.
I see. So you're saying that there's, if we're going to maybe making grants so that's the third class. Okay, so we just paid for it. It's like an open thing. We paid for it, but we don't care that it's a business that's useful anyway. And then there's this is a project that is maybe getting funding from multiple sources. We're a contributor. We have limited license to complain about anything really. And probably we don't have a say over whether it's a business or not, but maybe we can ask them to at least adopt the BSL or something.
Yeah, if Intersect was providing millions to a project, I could see it saying, well, our conditions for that are it's open source. But if it's saying, well, you could have access to up to $40,000 in ADA for this thing that costs a lot to create and costs a lot in expertise to be able to create, like, being open to allowing those creators to have a commercial interest means that Intersect is able to be more welcoming and actually business friendly. It's all about the principle of business friendly from this point of view.
I think it kind of aims towards the utility interests Intersect might have for Cardano in the future, and different partnerships on a commercialization piece. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, and I did try to make this point in our Discord discussion as well. And again, I don't know if this is within the scope of this committee, but I think we should view there as being kind of two different classes of grant. There's a broadcloth or whole cloth. We're paying you to develop something or maintain something from scratch versus being more of a sponsor of continuing the maintenance of a project. And that's where we could say that, you know, we will sponsor to some greater or lesser degree anything that's BLS to full open source. If it's, you know, we're paying for a contract, you know, for some new thing to be developed where we will own it fully under Intersect, there I would say it probably makes more sense that it's fully open source from the start. So there's kind of a level to touch on what Randall was saying, you know, hey, these grants aren't enough. I need to go and also build a business on top of this work because, you know, you're giving me a pittance or a stipend. Okay, well, we'll support BSL in those cases for smaller grants. Whereas if we're paying you to do work and that's a 6-month contract to develop something, you know, in my opinion, that should be open source because it is it kind of depends on the level of funding, which license we would accept, I believe. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be, it's not fully in the sole aspect of this committee. Like, we would determine the open source licenses used, but the actual contracts and things we'd be working with other committees in partnership on this for sure. I'll go Michael, Pat, then Sebastian.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and agree with Adam that I think that seems pretty sensible. And, you know, I think we might want to say, look, we have a bright line, which is the maybe we do want to have a bright line and say the stuff that is actually owned by Intersect, MBO, or whatever is fully open source. But we're going to have grants for other things, and maybe the committee can sort of recommend to the grant making body, you know, we should say, we think that you should buy, you know, you should try and buy like BSL licensing. You know, if you're in negotiation with someone who you're giving a grant to, just like, you know, we think it's valuable, put that in the conditions, you know, see if they'll go for it. That, you know, we're not going to say we think you should really argue super hard for it has to be open source, but try and get BSL, and maybe that could be our advice to the grants people.
Yeah, I'll just chime in also. I mean, it is obviously a valuable conversation. I tend to agree with Adam's comments on kind of scope of the committee, but it also kind of was reminiscent of our discussions last year where we kind of defined like what are the most important things we need to achieve for Intersect and do the big difficult, you know, things first, and we don't need to over optimize for certain things at this stage. And so I think it might be productive in terms of the roadmap for this year to say, as a prioritization framework, hey, things that are like still on the critical path and aligned to the kind of license, the most open source kind of ideals of the community. And then once we hit certain milestones or we're getting into a place where there is something that is mission critical and has some other commercial, like there's a framework for when the BSL conversation would be worth a deeper discussion. I feel like we still have to earn the right to get there though, because there's much closer to the core things that speak to, you know, things that fit more widely accessible as just open source tooling or things that can be adopted in the community that could be closer in the radar. And without having a list of those things kind of right in front of me, I would just say, you know, when is the right time to have this in terms of all of the other work that is being prioritized for this year would probably be a good way to just set expectations to folks that, you know, we want to earn the right to have those more difficult conversations because it's helping scale the network effects or some of the other adoption items that people are talking about getting more, you know, community momentum.
I'll actually let Matt go first since he's connected closely to it.
Well, I was just gonna say another topic of conversation that we've had is ideas come in all different manifestations and can come from all different places. And I was just gonna say something that we are working on is if a committee or a working group has a bright light, has an idea, has a conversational piece, you guys set your own parameters for what you think you should or shouldn't discuss, but we are working on a place where you can go, oh, we've had a really good idea, but actually we don't think it's open source problem, we need a place that we can reliably put it so that we know that it will be given to the right people to have the right conversation to fan it out. So I was just saying that's in our thinking as well, is we need, because anyone in any working group or committee can have an idea and it might be completely separate from the area they're working in. So can't answer your question, but that methodology of how that problem moves from anyone to a place where it can be homed is what we're working on. And when I have an answer, I will bring it back, and all the secretaries and committees and working groups will be told, if you have an idea which you think is outside your remit, put it here, and you can be assured it will be triaged and given a home and given to the right person or committee or working group to deal with it. That was all. Thanks.
Sebastian?
Yeah, on to this, many good points so far. I wanted to point out also that maybe we haven't discussed licensing at all, and yeah, maybe to Pat's point, maybe it's not the right time or need right now. We will also need to find out how this is with grant giving and so on. We're not in account of this. But I think certainly the open source committee's opinion, I guess, kind of implied is that we should not support closed source development, right? On the contrary point. But, and I also want to point out, there is always the possibility of double licensing, right? Just because you put something out in the open doesn't mean that you can't give commercial licenses out, right? If you put it open source and have a copyleft license, MPL, for example, you can double license for commercial use if someone really wants to reuse your stuff. So that is another way, which is, and I didn't know that detailed about BSL in the past, but I mean, we'll find ways and discussions. I think all of these kind of fulfill the need of, we want to have more reuse and encourage collaboration in the whole ecosystem, and it should be no-brainer whether you put out your stuff to be reused by others in the future, and you can protect your IP through more copyleft maybe.
Okay, we're near the top of the hour, so I'll let Randall go, then Michael, and then we'll close out and discuss this further in the Discord.
Main point I would make is just that when we say you can't have a grant because you're using BSL, which is open source later, you're not going to have the engagement that you seek in the grant program.
Michael?
I just wanted to I think we don't have time to discuss this, but I maybe even disagree with Sebastian. It's not clear to me that just because Intersect has an open source committee, that means that Intersect should not support the occasional closed source project. There may come times when we think, well, you know, actually it would be really helpful if there was a business doing X in the ecosystem, and you know, someone wants to do one and needs grant funding, and maybe that's something that Intersect should fund. Now, I feel like that's kind of almost out of our remit, but I'm not sure whether we can. I'm not sure I would want to categorically say that we shouldn't support it. I think we should say we prefer it, and you know, like I said, maybe we're willing. We should say we want to buy, if we can buy the licensing from our grantees, or maybe it's an advantage that makes us more likely to fund people. But I don't know whether I'd want to categorically say we won't do it, or maybe we do. I don't. That would actually be quite a big statement that I feel like we maybe need to, you know, ask some other people about.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate everyone talking on this. We're gonna continue the conversation on the Discord. Thank you, Alex, for your inputs into it and helping clarify it. And I'll get this recording with meeting minutes out within the next hour or two once it processes. But celebration, we at least have two different things we enacted, quote unquote. So yeah, first committee in Intersect actually passed something. So we're mature. Thank y'all.
Yeah.
See y'all next
Look
week.
at the governance policy.
Bye.
It's so
Nice
pretty.
weekend.
See you around.
See you guys. Good work.